Despite Germany still not having a government following the September 24th elections, markets seem to be taking it in their stride. But what does it mean for Brexit talks, for the euro, and also for the longer-term direction of Europe? Constantine Fraser is joining us now from TS Lombard. Welcome. First of all, the German government, as a political analyst, does it concern you that we have not yet, as we look into 2018, got a German government?
I don't think it should at this stage. It's fairly normal in those countries that operate coalition governments for it to take a little bit of time for the coalition deal to get brokered. And so we're probably, I suppose it's unusual that the first attempt to strike a deal between Merkel CDU, the Liberal FDP and the Greens fell apart last month. But talks will be beginning again now, and I wouldn't worry about it too much.
But when you've got the third largest party as being on the far right wing of German politics, the AfD, as the third largest party, I mean, that's going to ring alarm bells for a lot of people. And how much more difficult do you think it's going to be for them to go and get some sort of deal? Yes. Or could we end up with a minority German CDU party government?
Yes, well, I suppose the entrance of the AfD into the German parliament makes it harder for the mainstream parties to construct a majority, to essentially assemble enough votes from between themselves. I'd now say there's a small chance of the talks falling apart and eventually having to go to new elections. The likelihood is...
What do you put that at? Rerun the elections. What sort of percentage are we looking at?
I'd still only put that at around 20%.
Right.
The likelihood is either that Merkel CDU is now going to begin talks with the centre-left SPD, who are Germany's traditional centre-left party, who have been her junior partner in 2 of the last 3 governments. They are likely to demand quite a lot to want to enter a new government with her, and this might be too high a price for the CDU, in which case Merkel may end up running a minority government, which would be unprecedented in Germany, but could actually work quite well. Otherwise, if the talks go well, we might see a repeat of exactly the same government as we've had for the last 4 years.
So what are the effects of all this?
More of the same.
Yeah, more of the same. So what are the effects of all this going to be on Europe and the cohesion of Europe? Europe's in an interesting moment at the moment. We've got the Catalonians, of course, we've got Brexit in the background. We're hearing murmurings from other separatists across Europe that they might be wanting to go out alone. Yes. Potentially, we have a crisis boiling. I mean, we've got to have a German government by then, or presumably we could be in real trouble.
Well, for the first time in quite a few years now, there isn't anything immensely urgent with which a German government has to deal. We saw the euro crisis, we saw the refugees crisis. Now Europe's politics can take a little bit of a breather, at least for now. I mean, the main drawback of Germany not being able to form a government is that France's new president, Emmanuel Macron, has got rather grand plans for redesigning the Union and strengthening the Eurozone, and he wants and needs a partner in Germany with whom he can work. And while Germany is still trying to cobble together a government of its own, it's not going to be able to meet him halfway.
Part of those plans coincide with the plans that have been announced by Martin Schulz, the leader of the SPD, about the federal Europe and so forth, and he's actually setting a deadline on it. How is that going to go down with the German electorate if they do have to go back to the polls? Is that something that Germany does want?
Germany is, of all European countries, Germany is one of the most enthusiastically pro-European. There's been some polling out on Schulz's call for a federal Europe, which he made during the SPD conference last week, and about 30% of Germans seem to be favourable to it. So it's a minority it's a minority interest even in Germany. But the point, I think, the point is there that Schulz is trying to carve out a USP, a selling point for the SPD, who as I mentioned, have been Merkel's junior partners for quite a while now, and have been struggling to maintain an identity of their own. And Schulz clearly thinks that Europe is the field in which they could do that.
One final question on Germany. Recently, the Bavarian leadership has moved slightly further to the right.
Yes.
Does that cause a problem for Angela Merkel and a potential SPD agreement, coalition, and governments moving forward? I doubt it would cause a problem for the negotiations themselves and the formation of a new government. The change in the leadership of the CSU, which is the Bavarian sister party of Merkel's CDU, will be happening in 2018. By that stage,
the coalition deal will probably either be brokered or will have returned to new elections anyway. What it does mean, it does represent a strengthening of the right wing of of Merkel's party, the more Merkel sceptic wing of her own party. So she will be, yes, it strengthens her critics within her own party.
Yeah. Some of the commentators about what's happening with the Brexit negotiations always seems to be that, well, Germany hasn't got a government yet. Does that make a difference?
It doesn't make that much difference. There is a very wide consensus across the German political spectrum as to the broad approach to Brexit. Most of the decisions that have been taken so far have been by the national capitals have been on the broad framework for negotiations, and then they've left it up to the European Commission to do the actual work of negotiating. We're not negotiating. The UK isn't negotiating directly with Berlin. It's negotiating with the Commission as within the framework set by the national capitals. So they don't need to be involved on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So you're not surprised by the fairly sanguine attitude that the markets have taken to what's happening in Germany and Europe at the moment. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any cause for concern if you're trading the DAX or the euro currency or anything. No,
there's markets have been fairly relaxed about all the troubles in the coalition talks. Whatever happens, as I say, the political consensus, to be honest, on most issues is quite wide within Germany, and it's only a matter of time before Germany gets another stable government.
If there isn't another election, do you see traders in the euro and the DAX taking umbrage and moving away out of those assets, or do you think they'll just take it in their stride as another election, unusual though it may be?
I imagine they'll very much take it in their stride. The outlook's quite positive for both, and whatever the next German government is, they have quite a lot of money to play with. There's a general government surplus of about 30 billion, which will probably, between added investment and tax cuts, will probably get poured into the German economy.
That's an interesting point as well, because the further the government goes to the left, the more likely it is that sort of thing is likely to happen, isn't it?
Well, even the CDU, even Merkel's own party, has committed to about 15 billion euros worth of tax cuts, plus more money on investment. So really, we're expecting, and in addition to that, if she forms a minority government, she'll probably have to compromise to her left, given the balance of forces in the Bundestag, in the German Parliament. So we're expecting whatever happens, really, there to be the next German government to provide a stimulus of about 0.75% of GDP.
Does this go far
to a German economy that's already performing very well?
Does this go far enough down the road to appease those global economists that say that Germany is not doing enough to distribute its surplus, because many are saying it's a destabilising influence on global growth, the fact that Germany is not distributing that surplus?
Yes, well, I mean, this should certainly help. And if eventually, if it helps contribute to inflation picking up in Germany, which we may see perhaps at some point later this year, that will help rebalance the Eurozone in particular.
Constantine, we've got to leave it there, but thanks indeed for joining us. Constantine Fraser, taking a look there at politics as we move into 2018. Constantine is from TS Lombard.